Yes.
I mean, it's not like it's a popular name or something. So
wow. Way to ruin that for me.
I'm sorry. I was just sassing you. Their home was mud-walled. It had a thatched roof, and it was basically a small cabin. She had 2 older brothers, Michael and Edmund, both of which don't come back, really. I haven't read anything where they've just popped back up, aside from, I guess, her dad, Patrick, aimlessly talking about them every once in a while. Patrick may have been near 40 when Bridget was born. He specifically in court later would say, quote, "I had no one in the world to turn to but my daughter. Her mother and myself gave her a good trade. She was only 26 years of age and a fine milliner and able to give us a bit of money. And when our mother died, she was the only one I had in the world to look to. It was not me that should ever have put a finger to her." In 1895, obviously she's grown up. There's not a bunch about her childhood, but she was sent into Clonmel.
Never took a Gaelic class.
This is your history. She was sent to Clonmel, where she was a dressmaker's apprentice. While she was there, she met Michael Cleary. He was working as a cooper, which basically means that he made barrels. Yeah. And specifically, his barrels were intended for butter churns and to keep milk and stuff like that to ferment for other items because they lived pretty straight up in the countryside.
Yeah.
She did, after they had gotten married, return back to her home in Ballyvadlia to live with her parents. Her mother was getting up in age and had become sick, and her dad obviously also getting up in age. They had lived apart, and during that time her independence grew. Her parents had gotten her a Singer sewing machine, which would help her to develop a craft. As well as having hens and different fowl that she would either sell the eggs from or sell the fowl itself. Yeah. So she was an enterprising young lady.
Yes, yes.
And obviously her parents saved up enough, as they were both laborers, to get her this to make sure that she had a better place in the world.
She was an entrepreneur,
yes,
if you will.
Totally. The pair was married for about 8 years total before her death.
Not a super long time.
No. And after her mother had died, that's when he had made his way back to working out there. He did have a successful trade while he was in the other village, but obviously wanted to hang around with his wife because that's how you do things. And they together helped take care of Patrick Boland, her father.
Yeah, which, you know, when you get older and things start happening to your parents, a lot of times you do that.
Right. The area had about 272 acres total as a town, and there were 9 houses on record by the census and 31 people that lived there. Clearly super tiny. Everyone pretty much knew each other. When people would speak about her later, they said that she was, quote, a bit queer. She didn't dress as the neighbors. She was able to make her own dresses. She was an entrepreneur, so she ended up dressing very nicely and kind of supposedly saw herself above the other people that were in the area, which were mostly laborers and a little bit poorer than herself and Michael.
Yeah.
She sometimes, if she wanted to be fancy, would wear a black straw hat with a hat pin, navy ribbon, and 2 brown feathers. Oftentimes she was wearing a red petticoat, a striped petticoat, gray or green stays, a navy flannel dress, a navy cashmere jacket, and a white knitted shawl, all with black stocking and some boots. She's super fancy. She was described as middle height, brownish hair, blue eyes, regular features, or what someone said was a pretty woman. She had a strong personality, and she was healthy and distinctively good looking.
Aw, what a nice lady.
There was a town not super far away. It's about 4 miles away, and most of the people in this area would walk because they didn't have the opportunity to have horses. But the clergy that were in the town would ride horses out to there, or the doctors. One time, I guess one of the clergy members was riding past their house, and her dog had approached and attacked the horse, probably because it was so unfamiliar with the horse just striding through its area. And she didn't do anything about it, which don't like that she just didn't say anything and wasn't like, oopsie doopsie, sorry, let me go grab my dog real quick and stop him from attacking a horse. But I guess the father had gotten a little bit fussy and had struck the dog, to which she responded with throwing the boiled potato water that she was currently outside making at him.
Well, good for her.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm with it.
That's the part that I was like, oh, Ty's gonna be into it.
Yeah, that's right. You scald that motherfucker.
Yeah, don't kick my dog, motherfucker.
Yeah, take my potato water, you piece of shit.
He didn't seem to be injured by it, so there's that.
Too bad.
When they had gotten married in August of 1887, he was 27 and she was 18. For this particular area, it was very young for the women in her generation. Most of them got married around 26, 27. And the men would also get married a little bit over 30, according to census reports.
Okay. Was that a relatively larger age difference even at the time, or was that typical?
It didn't say whether or not it was. For me, I feel like that's real fucked up.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. When she had moved back with Michael, they had moved into a cabin that was designated for laborers. In the 1800s, especially the 1880s, after the famine had finally gone away and people were starting to go again, the area started going into decline and people were emigrating to America to find a better life for themselves. The people that were left over were given an incentive to move into cottages on usable farmland in order to make the area flourish a little bit better.
Yeah.
So the government actually built a bunch of houses specifically for laborers. As she wasn't a laborer and neither was Michael, they had to put Patrick, her dad's name, on the lease. The fun thing about this, and people kind of feel like this might have enhanced the lore, was that the cottage that they eventually ended up living in was originally given to somebody else, but problems consistently arose with the person that was there. As the Daily Express said, quote, "It was alleged that the fairies who held high revel on moonlit nights on rat holes quite close to the cottage were displeased with the tenant and so annoyed him by unearthly cries and noises at night that he fled from the locality." The reason it kind of plays in the mythology of this particular family is because after they took over the residence, nothing was reported. So it's basically like, I want this house. I'm going to haunt you until you move so I can get in this house. I'm not going to lie, there have been houses that I've wanted to rent. There will be one forever that I will remember. And it's from like 6 years ago that I was planning on renting it, and the kitchen was just gorgeous. And I was trying to convince the boys to haunt the house with me so that that person would move out. It was a real pretty house.
I could see where that maybe play into some people's thoughts about it, like after all of the story.
Right. The cottage still stands today, but it has been modified. They think that they moved in about 1891. Michael had set up a cooper business in the parents' old house. The old cabin was made into a workshop. So this is where everything goes a bit awful. Awful is a very tiny bit of a word here for Bridget. So Bridget had started walking towards her father's cousin's house, and it's unclear whether or not she was delivering eggs or was trying to collect a payment for eggs. But for whatever reason, eggs were involved, and she walked like your parents and like your grandparents over a mile uphill in the snow both ways to get to their house.
Gotcha. Not 15 miles.
No. Barefoot. What's the other part of it? It's like barefoot, no coat.
We had to walk 15 miles in the snow to change the TV channel, and there were only 2 of them.
That's why they invented the clicker. Yeah. The thing is, another one of the thoughts is that they lived very close to a ferry fort, and this would have been on the way as she was going to her father's cousin's house, delivered these eggs, that she would have had to pass at least by, if not through, this ferry fort, which normally, in accordance to archaeologists, was a circular ring, which I understand differentiates between different cultures that believe in fairy circles and stuff like that. But specifically, this is normally a fence or a dual fence that was used either as protection or a marking of their territory that has gone the way of because it was from the medieval periods.
So in relatively recent years, and Chevy and I were both told about this when we were in Ireland together back in 2008, the Irish government paid 3 million euro to divert a highway around a ferry fort because they are so superstitious that they did not want to fuck with the ferry fort.
I have facts on this.
Yay.
That's a thing that's happening right now. The locals obviously had believed that this is where the Fae were dwelling. Specifically in this town, the closest ferry fort was Kylenagrana. I hope that's right because I don't want to continue to say it wrong.
Well, if someone has a problem, they can email us, which they never do.
That's true. In history, especially in Irish history, building on what you were talking about earlier, with them spending a lot of money to divert around a fairy circle, there's another thought about a rock that was supposed to be home to elves that they had to divert around because any time that they went to go through it, it would just bad things would happen to the people that were trying to go through it. The same thing with fairy circles. So if you look at a map of a lot of the roads in Ireland, you'll see that a lot of them have weird roundabouts to go around fairy circles and stuff like that, because obviously the superstition is still somewhat prevalent in some areas. With that being said, from both those here at Chatham and Dirk, done. Good story, right? With that being said, after locals refused to go through, there's also a lot of reference to outsiders that were coming in that had met with some bad times after trying to go through either fairy circles or places that they think that elves lived.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with it.
When she was walking past Kyla and Grana, that's what I just said?
Yep.
Cool. When she was walking past Kyla and Grana on her way home after she gave up because her father's cousin wasn't at home, she said that she felt a headache and she felt unlike herself while she was walking past. The next day, she woke up with a violent headache, shivering fits, was unable to leave her bed, and her sickness continued even after the weather had grown more mild but wetter. So it's literally what's happening right now, where we had snow and now it's just better but wet.
Oh, the timing for the story.
Right?
How appropriate.
I was reading that last night and I was like, accidental but appropriate. Bridget became sick for several days. Several men, mostly her family members, cousins, her husband, her father, had surrounded the bed. And this is in anyone and everyone's statement when they went to court. They tried to force herbs boiled in new milk into her mouth. New milk at this time was referring to the first milk that a mother cow gives to her calf. It's basically like breast milk, where the first couple days is the antibodies and proteins and like a whole bunch of really good things for the kid. And it's intended to basically be a curative for people that need to have a little bit more strength and immunity.
Yeah.
Which she clearly did.
Because she had the sickies.
She had the sickies. By the way, I wrote book.
The black flame candle.
Michael Kennedy, who was a cousin of... I'm like really far away from this. I'm like dad lounging. Michael Kennedy, who was a cousin, had gone after he had stopped at his mother's house. And she had told him that there's some weird stuff happening and she's not really feeling so great down at the Cleary house. And when he did arrive, he saw the men standing around the bed. So as Bridget became sicker and sicker over the course of about 8 days, her husband started to believe that maybe she was a changeling, and this may be due to him having a psychotic break, and it may just be due to the culture that was surrounding the area around them. So although they were better off than most of their neighbors, they still spent a lot of time on the oral traditions, which were largely steeped in some sort of folklore. Herbal remedies were obviously taken over medical advice, albeit her father and Michael had quite decided that she needed medical treatment and had spent 4 miles of walking, which is like, what, like half a day? Let's see. If I was walking quickly, 4 miles is...
An hour. I can walk 4 miles in an hour.
Okay, well, I'm looking at my tiny little hobbit legs there, mister. 4 miles, if I was like at a regular pace of my walking, would probably take like a little under 2. I'm a tiny person. My legs don't... They just don't. I walk like a wind-up toy.
I think you could walk 4 miles in an hour. I really do.
Yeah, but up a hilly expanses.
Well, up a hill might be different. You have to think about incline.
So her father was the first one to start walking. They went to where they had a dispensary, which is basically what would be considered a clinic here. Mm-hmm. But at the time, Ireland had this great movement which had a basic universal health care. They actually became one of the biggest purveyors of health care to people who were poor or could not afford good health care by themselves in Europe.
Good on ya.
So I'm going to talk about this fucko. This man. I hate this man. This fucking dude. Because he's a bad person. The resident doctor of the dispensary was William Crean. He is a piece of shit. So while her father went up there and he didn't find the doctor at the dispensary, he went to a person in the area. And so at this time, they had black cards and red cards. Red cards meant you needed a home visit, and black cards meant that it was fine for them to be able to come see you. And you had to acquire these well prior to going to the dispensary. Mm-hmm. So it's basically like a script for, let's say, our dispensaries, which have pot at them.
Yeah.
But depending on the severity, there could be home visits that are allowed. He went to the man that was in charge of giving out the cards to gain access to the doctors at the dispensary. That doctor gave him a red card so that he was able to have a home visit for his daughter. The problem with this is that the doctor, William Crean, was not at the dispensary. He was mysteriously missing. He left word to come immediately because his daughter was super sick. And then the doctor didn't come. And then the next day, the doctor didn't come. And midway through the next day, when the doctor didn't come, her husband, Michael, had gone to the doctor and was like, hey, yo, can you please come take care of my wife? The doctor had been out with somebody else, treating somebody else, just was out, and said that he would stop by the house.
He was having lunch.
Oh, he was having lots of things.
He was brunching. Okay.
Brunching, white girl brunching, for sure.
Yeah, there were mimosas.
There we are. By the time that Crean had made it to the residence of the Clearys and or Bolin, it was almost 6 days after she had gotten sick. It was several days after they had sent for help, and he's a dick. He is a holy shit dickhead.
I mean, in case there wasn't any doubt of that up to this point, yeah. Just let a sick person be sick for that long and get worse.
He's such a piece of shit.